Dan Hodgson is a warrior, but uses no man-made weapons for battle. He planted Acts Ministries in High Point, North Carolina, in order to help meet the needs of the lost and forgotten. But it was only after years of searching that he finally understood the mission he was to carry out.
I'm a combat veteran, so killing was nothing out of the ordinary. In fact, I became very well acquainted with it. It was acceptable. I could go out and pick a fight, so to speak, and it was appropriate. I could go find a drug dealer, a really bad, tough drug dealer. I found myself surrounded with the same kind of guys, SWAT guys that lived for action. We were adrenaline junkies. That was my drug of choice, was adrenaline, but I was also a very, very heavy drinker. And that's all warrior stuff. So when I found myself coming to the Lord, found myself spiritually flat on my face, and realizing that I've lost just about everything but my career, then like many other people, regardless of their place in life, you're looking up. Then I found myself wondering, how can God use a person like me?
Dan's search for his place in ministry began.
Before I knew it, I was in church leadership, or just finding myself there, finding, people asking me to help lead, help teach. And while I was in church and witnessing more of the worship service, realizing that it wasn't lining up with what I was reading, what God was revealing to me in His Word. I remember sitting at the back of a worship service and thinking, I've seen this much emotion in a KISS concert. And with my minor in psychology and having taught mob behavior in different forums and setting, I realize how easily people are ramped, how easily they're manipulated into an emotional response. I just knew it didn't feel right. And I was also being called to, I felt like I had this passion to have compassion over the least of these, which is specifically talked about in Matthew 25.
He began to feel uneasy about what he was experiencing within the church.
The church was meant for all socioeconomic classes, all ethnic groups. The church, though professing an outreach attitude, took on a James 2 attitude, which meant, well, you can come in if you have money, but if you don't, sit over here. Or even so, the priority of keeping carpets clean was over the command to go feed the least of these. And that just went against everything that I was believing at the time and still believe. So we exited the church and then realized I didn't care what the church thought of me.
And so the mission of Acts took off, out in the streets.
It was pretty much, we're just going to go out and do this. And I knew, because of working in the city for 29 years, where we would find them. High crime, low income areas, homeless camps. We started in the homeless camps and worked our way up. Who's hungry? Who needs clothes? Who needs a tent? We didn't start out by giving tents. I didn't do that until we actually planted Acts. If I knew I was feeding a homeless guy, I was literally feeding Jesus. He said that, and if I believe in His Word, then I have to believe in the meaning of that word.
Then came the Sunday meetings.
Everyone was welcome. We didn't care if you were rich, poor. Anyone could come in with their dirty boots or do whatever they needed to do, because we were all broken people. We were all sinners.
And where do the ministry's funds and provisions come from?
I never asked. We've just been obedient to doing what we're doing, and we're in our third building in almost 5 years, and we've never had to pay rent. We've had 2 vehicles given to us. We needed vehicles. I never asked anybody. I don't get paid. And I made a commitment then again. You go back into the first century church. There's nothing wrong with a pastor being paid. But you go back to the first century church. Jesus Himself did not get paid. He was a carpenter. If you look at all the disciples, they were all self-employed. It wasn't until Constantine organized the church for the government's purposes. He was the emperor of Rome, that they started paying the clergy. So no one will ever be paid here.
Dan doesn't take his calling to carry out the mission of Acts lightly, but seems to enjoy the journey.
It's not a burden. It is a responsibility that I should take serious, but it's not a burden. I never see it as a burden. My mission is to put this in as pure a state as we
possibly can. We're obviously not going to grow our hair, wear sandals and togas, but we are going to honor His word, and I'm going to be responsible for that.
It's an adventure.